The October evening carried a gentle chill, softening the bustling pace of Los Angeles. In the grand lobby of one of the city's most luxurious hotels, the shimmering crystal chandeliers bathed everything in an air of opulence and grandeur. Amidst this splendor, a man with a modest appearance walked in. He wore a simple black blazer paired with jeans and slightly scuffed sneakers. That man was Keanu Reeves. Yet no one in the lobby recognized him. Moving at a leisurely pace toward the front desk, his kind eyes betrayed a hint of weariness, as though he had endured a long day. Behind the reception desk stood Amanda, a confident-looking employee dressed impeccably in her uniform. The moment she noticed Keanu, her eyes scanned him from head to toe. Arching an eyebrow, she flashed a cold, dismissive smile and asked in a tone laced with disdain, "Excuse me, are you sure you have a reservation here? This isn't just a place anyone can walk into." Keanu nodded gently, his faint smile remaining unshaken. Taking out his phone, he calmly searched for his reservation email and handed it to Amanda. Instead of carefully checking it, she gave it a brief, indifferent glance and replied coolly, "This hotel caters to an elite clientele, people of status and class. I'm afraid this might not be the right place for you." Amanda's words sliced through the atmosphere like a knife. A few guests seated in the lounge nearby began to take notice, their curious and slightly puzzled glances turning toward the interaction. Among them were Emily and David, a young couple celebrating their wedding anniversary. Sharing a silent look, Emily leaned closer to David and whispered, her voice tinged with doubt, "David, do you think that's Keanu Reeves? He looks just like him." David shook his head slightly, skepticism clear in his voice. "It can't be. Why would he be here?" Meanwhile, Keanu remained calm, meeting Amanda's icy glare with quiet composure. Yet, if one looked closely, they might notice a flicker of hurt flash through his eyes. He asked gently but with deep meaning, "Is this how all your guests are treated here?" Amanda chuckled coldly, her laugh laced with disdain. "Only those who don't belong here. You know, there's a budget motel just down the street. That might suit you better." The lobby seemed to freeze in time. Amanda's bitter words echoed in the air, making the nearby guests visibly uncomfortable. Some looked at Keanu with pity, others with surprise at his unshakable composure. He stood there, silent yet resolute, like a serene lake in the midst of a storm. The tension in the hotel lobby was taut, like a string pulled to its limit. Amanda's arrogant words hung in the air, making the entire space feel oppressive. The guests in the vicinity, though not intervening, were unmistakably drawn to the scene unfolding before them. Some cast glances of sympathy toward Keanu, while others appeared intrigued by his remarkable composure. Amanda, however, maintained her cold demeanor. She tapped her fingers against the keyboard of her computer as if searching for an excuse to dismiss this man. But before she could utter another word, a voice cut through the tense atmosphere. "Amanda, what's going on here?" All eyes shifted to the man who had just entered the lobby. It was James, the hotel manager. Dressed in a sharp suit and carrying an air of authority, James immediately caused Amanda to falter. However, the most striking detail was James's expression upon seeing Keanu. His eyes widened, and his lips parted as if struggling to process what he was witnessing. "Oh my God," James stammered, his voice catching in his throat. He quickly strode toward the reception desk, his face filled with worry. Looking at Amanda, he asked in a tone that was both urgent and incredulous, "Amanda, do you even know who you're speaking to?" Amanda furrowed her brow, confusion etched across her face. "Just a guest who doesn't seem to fit our hotel's profile," she replied dismissively. "I'm handling it." James froze momentarily, taking a deep breath before speaking, his voice trembling. "You don't recognize him, do you? This isn't just any guest. This is Mr. Reeves. He owns this hotel." James's words struck like a bolt of lightning on a clear day. The entire lobby fell into stunned silence. Amanda stood rooted to the spot, her face draining of color as though she had seen a ghost. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. She turned to look at Keanu, her eyes wide with panic, silently hoping this was some kind of mistake. But the slow, deliberate nod from James confirmed that every word was true. By the fireplace, Emily gently squeezed David's hand, her voice trembling with astonishment. "I knew it. I told you it was Keanu Reeves. He really owns this hotel." David nodded, his eyes never leaving Keanu, who stood there with quiet composure yet radiating an undeniable presence. Amanda finally managed to stammer a response. I didn't know. I truly didn't know. Please forgive me." Keanu didn't answer immediately. His gaze rested on Amanda, not with anger, but with a profound sadness that compelled her to lower her head. His voice, warm yet piercing, cut through the silence. "As a receptionist, have you forgotten the most important part of your job? It's respect." Keanu's words felt like a blade slicing through Amanda's shield of arrogance. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the desk, her face pale and flushed with shame. Around them, the other guests watched in silence, none daring to breathe too loudly. James, unable to hide his own unease, stepped forward. Bowing slightly toward Keanu, his voice was filled with remorse. "Mr. Reeves, I take full responsibility for what happened here. This is not how our hotel operates. I promise to do everything necessary to make things right." Keanu remained silent for a moment, as though weighing his thoughts carefully. His gaze swept across the room, from Amanda, whose face was still drained of color, to the guests holding their breath, and finally to Emily and David, who observed the unfolding scene with both admiration and unease. Finally, Keanu spoke in a calm, deliberate tone. "We don't fix mistakes with words. Actions are what truly matter." The lobby seemed to hold its breath after Keanu's words. His eyes, gentle yet firm, locked onto Amanda. There was no anger in his voice, but that absence only made his words more profound, resonating deeply within everyone present. Speaking slowly, his words deliberate, Keanu continued, each syllable like a stone dropping into still water. "I didn't build this hotel to draw lines between the rich and the poor, or to judge who is important and who is not. I wanted it to be a place where anyone, no matter where they're from, can feel warmth and respect." Amanda froze in place, her throat tightening as if the very air had been drawn from her lungs. Keanu's words were like rays of light piercing through the darkest corners of her heart, illuminating the arrogance and prejudice that had taken root there for so long. Keanu paused, his gaze drifting into the distance as though revisiting a painful memory. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, imbued with an indescribable weight. "There was a time when I didn't know where my next meal would come from. I didn't know where I'd sleep at night. I know what it feels like to be looked down upon because of your appearance or your circumstances. That's why I wanted this hotel to be different, not a place of luxury, but a place of compassion and humanity." His voice trailed off, but the impact of his words lingered. The other guests, who had initially been passive onlookers, now seemed deeply moved. Some glanced at Amanda with understanding, while others looked inward, perhaps reflecting on their own assumptions and biases. Amanda, standing frozen at the desk, felt as though her entire world had shifted. Each word from Keanu struck her with the force of a tidal wave, not to punish her, but to awaken something she had long ignored, a capacity for empathy, buried beneath years of pride and prejudice. Keanu's words hung in the air like a quiet melody, impossible to ignore. They weren't just directed at Amanda, but seemed to speak to everyone in the room, challenging them to reevaluate how they treated others. This moment of truth transformed the atmosphere in the lobby. No longer tense or oppressive, it became a space filled with quiet contemplation and heartfelt emotion, as though Keanu's message had touched something universal in each person present. Keanu's words cast a profound silence over the hotel lobby. Amanda didn't dare to lift her head. A wave of regret, cold and unrelenting, coursed through every corner of her heart, leaving her breathless. By the fireplace, Emily clutched David's hand tightly, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "He's not just a celebrity, he's a real human being, someone who has endured so much pain, yet chooses to spread kindness." David nodded slightly, admiration evident in his gaze. Maybe that's why he's still standing strong, even after facing things most people couldn't even imagine. Finally, Amanda looked up, her eyes red and glistening with unshed tears. Her voice quivered, every word laden with remorse. I was wrong. I have no excuse for my behavior. I let arrogance and prejudice blind me. Please, forgive me." Keanu regarded Amanda for a long moment. His gaze held no anger, but instead a quiet compassion, as though he sought to help her see that mistakes weren't an end. They were a chance for a new beginning. He spoke gently, yet his words carried a weight that made them impossible to ignore. Forgiveness isn't just a word. It's how you choose to live from now on. What you do when no one is watching, that's what truly defines who you are. His words weren't only for Amanda. They seemed to resonate in the hearts of everyone present. Emily and David, already moved, exchanged glances filled with deep emotion. Other guests nodded silently, as though each one had begun to reflect on their own actions and beliefs. Amanda bowed her head deeply, her voice breaking as she responded, "I promise to change. I will never let anyone feel disrespected again." Keanu gave a small nod, a faint smile flickering across his face. Yet, in his eyes lingered a profound sadness, one that spoke of the countless burdens he had carried, as though he wasn't just addressing Amanda but also himself, and the weight of the pain he had endured. The heavy tension that had once filled the lobby began to dissipate, replaced by a different kind of silence, one of reflection and awakening. Amanda's earlier humiliation had given way to a collective sense of introspection among the guests, each seemingly lost in their own thoughts. Then, a small, unexpected moment broke the stillness. From the far end of the lobby, a boy of about 8 years old slowly stepped forward, clutching his mother's hand tightly. He seemed hesitant, his eyes flickering with a mix of uncertainty and awe as he looked at Keanu. His mother, a gentle-looking woman, bent down to whisper something in his ear, offering a reassuring pat on his shoulder. The boy took a deep breath, then began to move closer to where Keanu stood. Keanu noticed the boy approaching and shifted his focus to him. His stern expression softened, and a gentle smile appeared on his face. Kneeling down so that their eyes were level, Keanu spoke in a warm, soothing tone. "Hey there, buddy. What's on your mind?" The boy clutched something in his small hands, his fingers trembling slightly as he worked up the courage to speak. His mother stood a few steps behind, her gaze filled with quiet encouragement and pride. "Hello, buddy. What's on your mind?" Keanu asked gently, his voice warm and inviting. The boy, his small hands trembling slightly, reached into his pocket and pulled out a neatly folded piece of paper. As he unfolded it, Keanu saw a simple yet heartfelt drawing of a man wearing a cape, standing tall like a superhero. At the top, written in a child's uneven handwriting, were the words, "To Mr. Reeves, the real superhero." For a moment, the entire hotel lobby seemed to freeze. Eyes widened in surprise and emotion as everyone turned their attention to the boy and Keanu. The boy, his voice quivering but sincere, spoke. "My dad used to watch your movies with me. He always said you were the nicest person in Hollywood. But I think you're more than that. I think you're a real superhero." Keanu stared at the drawing for a long moment. His eyes glistened with emotion, unable to hide the deep impact of the boy's words. His throat tightened, and for a few seconds, he couldn't speak. Finally, he knelt down even lower, gently placing a hand on the boy's shoulder, and said, his voice heavy with meaning, "Your dad must have been an incredible man. Thank you for sharing this with me." It means more than you can imagine. The boy beamed, his eyes shimmering with happiness. His mother, standing a few steps behind, placed a hand over her heart, her face reflecting profound gratitude. She gave Keanu a slight bow, silently expressing her heartfelt thanks. From across the room, Emily couldn't hold back her tears any longer. She leaned her head against David's shoulder, her voice trembling as she whispered just loud enough for him to hear. "I can't believe it. Someone who's been through so much pain can still live with such a tender heart." David nodded, his eyes also misty. "He's not just touching that boy's heart. He's touching all of ours." At the reception desk, Amanda stood frozen, her hands trembling and tears streaming down her cheeks. The boy's simple yet powerful gesture had shattered the walls of pride she had built around herself. She realized in that moment that kindness didn't require wealth or status. It only needed a sincere heart. Keanu carefully took the drawing from the boy, studying it once more before leaning forward and wrapping the child in a gentle embrace. His voice, warm and steady, carried a quiet strength. "Thank you, buddy. I'll keep this forever. You've given me a gift I'll treasure for the rest of my life." The entire lobby remained silent, yet every pair of eyes reflected the same unspoken emotion. From strangers to Amanda, James, Emily, and David, everyone was drawn into the beauty of this moment, a moment where love, loss, and hope intertwined. The atmosphere in the hotel lobby had not yet fully settled. The image of the boy and his real superhero drawing lingered deeply in everyone's minds. Amanda stood frozen at the reception desk, her hands gripping the edge tightly, as if holding herself together. Her heart weighed heavily with regret, not just for the harsh words she had spoken to Keanu, but for what they revealed about her own character. Keanu's words continued to echo in her mind. "Forgiveness isn't just a word. What you do when no one is watching is what truly defines who you are." Amanda suddenly realized how much of her life she had spent trying to prove herself, climbing the social ladder she believed she needed to be on. Yet, in that pursuit, she had lost something essential: the ability to connect with others and with herself. Taking a deep breath, Amanda slowly stepped toward Keanu, who was still kneeling, speaking gently to the boy. Her steps were hesitant, and her voice trembled, but it carried a newfound sincerity. "Mr. Reeves, I know my apology may not be enough to make up for what I did tonight, but I truly want to change. I want to be a better person. Please, give me the chance." Keanu turned toward her, his gaze calm and measured. He didn't respond immediately, but studied Amanda for a few moments, as though carefully weighing the sincerity of her words. Finally, he nodded slightly, his voice soft yet firm. "None of us are perfect, Amanda. What matters is whether you have the courage to face your mistakes and make them right." Amanda nodded back, tears streaming freely down her face. She bowed her head deeply, and for the first time that evening, a sense of relief began to wash over her, as though Keanu's forgiveness had unlocked a door she never knew she needed to walk through. James, the hotel manager, stood nearby, watching the exchange. Stepping forward, he placed a hand on Amanda's shoulder, his voice stern but compassionate. "Amanda, we all make mistakes, but what matters now is how you move forward. Work with a more open heart from here on." Amanda looked up, her eyes still brimming with tears, but now they held a glimmer of resolve. Turning back to Keanu, she said with determination, "I will. I'll prove it through my actions, not just my words. I promise you, and myself, that I'll be better." Keanu's faint smile reappeared. It wasn't large, but it carried a quiet trust, like a small beacon of light, guiding Amanda on the path ahead. Meanwhile, Emily and David remained seated by the fireplace, their emotions still raw. Emily leaned closer to David, her voice quivering with emotion. "He didn't just teach Amanda a lesson, he taught all of us that it's never too late to change and become a better version of ourselves." David nodded, his gaze fixed on Keanu. who now stood with quiet composure, his presence continuing to ripple through the room. David nodded, his gaze following Amanda as she returned to the reception desk with an entirely different demeanor. The arrogance she had once carried was gone, replaced by a gentle humility. It was as though she had shed a hardened shell to rediscover her true self. James approached Keanu, lightly patting him on the shoulder, his voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Not just for what you did tonight, but for reminding all of us here that kindness is what truly connects people, not luxury or status." Keanu gave a slight nod, but his eyes glimmered with an unspoken sadness, a sorrow that could not be named. He glanced around the lobby, taking in the faces of the guests who had witnessed everything, the mistakes, the regrets, and the promises of change. His gaze paused on the boy, who was smiling brightly, and his mother, who gently nodded at Keanu in silent gratitude. Keanu spoke slowly, his voice resonating like a gentle reminder. Change is never easy, but it is always worth it, and we all have the power to make it happen. As Keanu prepared to leave, the boy remained nearby, gazing at him with wide, admiring eyes, as if looking at a real-life superhero. Noticing the boy's unwavering gaze, Keanu gently called out, "Wait a second, little one." The boy turned back, his small hands clutching his mother's tightly, his eyes alight with excitement. Keanu crouched down and pulled a worn keychain from his coat pocket. Though it bore scratches, the light reflecting off it gave it a certain charm. Keanu smiled softly as he handed it to the boy. "This is from a movie I made a long time ago. It's not worth much, but I want you to have it. Let it remind you that superheroes don't just exist on screen. You can be a superhero too, by choosing kindness and spreading love." The boy's small hands trembled as he accepted the gift, his eyes brimming with tears. In a voice thick with emotion, he whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Reeves. I'll never forget what you said." His mother, standing just behind him, couldn't hold back her tears. She placed her hand over her heart and softly said to Keanu, "You didn't just make today special for my son. You gave him a memory that I know he'll carry for the rest of his life. Thank you." Keanu offered her a gentle smile, though his own eyes shimmered with an indescribable mix of happiness and sorrow. It was a moment where joy and pain seemed to coexist, creating a profound beauty that only he could fully understand. At the reception desk, Amanda stood watching from a distance. Keanu's actions had left her deeply unsettled. Inside, she felt an overwhelming urge. She had to do something to start over. As Keanu approached, Amanda bowed deeply, her voice trembling but resolute. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves. From you, I've learned not just a lesson in kindness, but also how to look within myself. I promise to do everything I can to become a better person, not just in my work, but in the way I treat others." Keanu nodded, his gaze gentle yet piercing, as though imparting an important truth. "Remember this, Amanda. Forgiveness isn't the end. It's the beginning. We all have the chance to become the people we want to be." Amanda smiled. A genuine smile. The first one she'd shown all evening. As Keanu left the lobby, every pair of eyes followed him. Emily leaned against David's shoulder, her voice soft and filled with wonder. "He's not just a star. He's a light guiding lost hearts." David nodded, his eyes fixed on Keanu's retreating figure. "He's endured things most people couldn't even fathom. But instead of letting pain consume him, he's chosen to transform it into strength he gives to others." Reaching his room, Keanu sat by the window, gazing out at the city aglow with lights. He placed the boy's drawing on the desk and stared at it for a long time. The words, "To Mr. Reeves, the real superhero," stood out vividly, carrying a meaning that felt deeper now than ever. Keanu picked up a pen, turned the drawing over, and wrote a short note on the back. "To the boy who reminded me that heroes come in all shapes and sizes. Thank you for being mine tonight. Keanu." Folding the paper carefully, he placed it in an envelope and asked the staff to deliver it to the boys' room before they checked out. The next morning, as the hotel bustled with new guests, Amanda was already at her post. Her demeanor noticeably changed. Her voice was warmer, her smile genuine. When she saw the boy and his mother leaving, she gave them a gentle wave, her expression filled with sincerity. The boy turned back to look at Amanda, waving in return. His sparkling eyes said nothing aloud, but Amanda felt a silent forgiveness in his gaze. From above, Keanu stood quietly, observing. He knew that in just one evening, lives had been touched. Not just Amanda's, but many others as well. Thank you for following this story. If you feel inspired, share this tale with your friends and loved ones. Don't forget to like and subscribe to your story so we can continue bringing meaningful narratives to life. The subscription link is available in the description below. Together, let's spread kindness everywhere.